Hi everyone, let's talk about the Defence of Procyon III, which is on Kickstarter right now, and the link to the campaign is in the description and in the corner of the screen. And I just finished a big playthrough for it. If you're wondering where all of the game and stuff is, then yeah, they're linked in the description as well, because it's just a bit where I'm talking about it, and I was paid to make the playthrough. It's always made clear. So yeah, this is a great big game designed by David Turcey, who has done amazing things, co-designed Petrichor, designed things like Redacted, Days of Ire, Knights of Fire, tons and tons of things that I'm sure I'll put some on the screen there, because I'm sure I'm going to miss a million. And does loads of solo modes now with Nick Shaw sometimes. And yes, let's put all of that aside. And what about Defence of Procyon III? So it's kind of 4 smaller games combined into one great big game. It's 4 small games that work together to make this big game. And so I can only really talk about the cooperative mode, because as you might have seen from my videos before, we're not really into fighting each other and stuff, so cooperative is the way for us. And yeah, for me in particular, I'm not really interested in war games either. And the kind of aim that David said is that he wants to try and get Eurogamers, which I would definitely classify myself as, to play war games or play something that is more war game like. And so we've got these distinct boards of action that's happening on the ground, action that's happening in space, 2 warring factions, the aliens and the humans. And amongst these, we are playing fairly different games. So just from the perspective of the humans, the ground players has got, you've got these heroes with special abilities. You are playing cards to try and get more activations, to try and trigger special effects right now, to try and plan ahead. If your characters get wounded, they're going to go into your hand and mess it up. Seen in that in particular, seen in other games and done really well in there. And yeah, it does work brilliantly at holding you up. You are definitely under the thumb on the ground board. The aliens definitely have a advantage in numbers and in strength from the principal, but the principal is what the ground units are called. And so you are playing a very, very defensive game out here. You still need to be on the attack sometimes. You need to know when a good time for that is. But your kind of main goal is getting your scientists, protecting your scientists from the principal, and getting them up into space where the Armada is going to hopefully carry them to safety. So you're kind of concerned with card play. You're concerned with it's more deterministic where the damage goes, because you can decide where it goes with a lot of special abilities. When damage is just done generally, it alternates between you and the alien player deciding where that damage goes. And obviously for the bot, there is a little list of priority for where the damage should go. So you can't just outright kill a Centurion or their Empress or something. You have to plan ahead, and it makes a massive difference to your tactics as well, because it's not just, okay, well, I do 4 damage and your Empress has got 6 health, so yep, now she's down to 2. Well, no, I've got to work out, is it worth me attacking all of this? Should I spend some momentum elsewhere? Should I spend this special ability, this ground strike or something elsewhere? So yeah, you're playing that kind of more deterministic, more under pressure, more on the defense side on the ground board. And then in space, well, for a start, you've still got a great big deck of tactics cards, but you are splitting those up, and you draw 6 cards at the very start of the game. 3 of them are going in your hand, and they are cards that you can play, and they are cards that have got the activations on them. And so what you're concerned about right now is which ships can I activate, because they do work fairly differently. You've got the very nimble little ships that are going to do damage to certain ships, but they're not really in it for the damage. They're in there for maneuvering, being able to move and attack all of the time. Then you've got your frigates that are a little bit tankier and can take a lot more spore damage and can zoom across as long as they are not attacking. And then your long lumbering dreadnoughts that can't really move very much, but once they get to where they're going are very, very powerful and can trigger much more useful things as well in cooperation with the expedition, the ground units. So you've got those cards there that are saying the ships that you want to attack, and then the clever thing in there is that you've got these abilities that seem great, but they are deferred abilities, essentially. The ability doesn't kick in until this goes in your discard pile at the end of your turn. So you are planning ahead for what you want now from the card and what you want to do next turn, balancing that out. But then also, you pick 3 of those cards for just their damage at the bottom, and they get turned into a little combat deck of 3, and every time you attack, you draw from that combat deck, and that's going to tell you how many hits that you did. So you are always trying to balance out, and there are some amazing abilities on cards that do a lot of damage, of course. So you are, weighing that up between, do I want to be able to activate more ships and do more things, or when fewer things get to activate, do you want them to do a lot more damage? And you are kind of, the aliens at the start are guarding the planet as you would expect, and you are on the outskirts of the board, and you are kind of leading them on in a bit of a dance, in that you are trying to draw them away from where the scientists are going to end up, to take them out where you can, because you don't want their numbers to overwhelm you. The alien player, in turn, is trying to get these spores out onto the board. That's what they're really, really concerned with, because the spores will get rid of the human shields, and once the ships don't have shields, they can just be taken out in one hit. So you are always trying to, split their attention up, to move them around to where you want them to go. Well, you can never really know what exactly they're going to do. You want to split their attention up. Try not to let them all zero in on one thing, and just riddle it with spores that you can't really get rid of that easily. You have 2 rare resources, your Prometheum and your Echo drones. The Echo drones are used for getting rid of those spores and things. But so you're playing very different games. But at the same time, and this will be true for the aliens on their side as well, that as you are playing these very different games, and not really, one of the things I thought when I was doing the playthrough, every time I get to a new faction, I have to explain all of these things. But when you are actually sitting down for a game, you only really need to understand what your faction does. And there's a really cool bit in the rulebook towards the beginning that is like, you need to understand your rulebook and what your faction does. But if anyone's got any question, or if anybody is making a really dumb move, then help them out and step in and say, no, that would be terrible, because this is what I'm doing here, because everyone's trying to have fun, and there are a lot of different things going out here. So it's kind of your job to learn what your faction does, and then kind of tell everyone that, well, these are my units, my aims are going to be this, and this. My aims to take out your Empress to get a load of points, to stop them getting to the city, and to try and send the scientists into space. So it's good for, you don't need to know all of these ins and outs from all of these factions, because that would be a lot to take on at once. But just your one faction isn't, I don't think. But yeah, there's this cooperation between the factions where you don't particularly need to know what is going on turn by turn, intricately. And kind of the differences in your factions and the depth of the decisions that you need to make mean that you can't really be on top of each other. It would surely eliminate alpha players, but in a similar way to Spirit Island, not gameplay wise, but in the sense that there was a complex thing going on. People's characters were very, very different and had different priorities and things. So you can't just assume what's happening and try and dictate the moves and things. It's up to you what you're going to do turn by turn. You can work out plans together. But having shared resources like the Echo drones, the Armada needs them to get rid of the spores, and the expedition need them to drop Marines down. We have 6 Marines that never start out on the board, and once we get certain ships out in space, we can be dropping them on here and get vital reinforcements. You do not have that many people out on the ground board, and so that can be really important. But of course, they're important at different times. You need to weigh up when that's going to happen. And the other part is the key to it's absolutely essential in the cooperative game. You are trying to get your scientists to places where they can be shipped off into space and turned into transports. But as soon as you've done that, even if you've built up Echo drones and you've got this perfect system, you've got your activations all set up, and you're going to send them out into space, that's no good if the Armada player isn't ready to escort them to safety, to try and make sure that they have a way in, or a way of moving the meld the space the space spacers, the alien space faction, the meld is trying to move the meld out of the way so that those scientists aren't quite as under attack, or even sometimes having to move a load of ships in there to be sacrifices to make sure that, they can only take 4 ships out at once. So if I put 5 ships in there, even though we can't deal with the spores, we're going to lose a load of ships. But the scientists will be safe and we can get them out to safety. And as soon as you've done the certain number for your difficulty, then you have won the game. So yeah, sometimes you're going to have to make those sacrifices. But yeah, it's a really, really clever way of having such different things going on, different problems that you need to deal with just for your faction, but having this, this really strong link between having to send things between the players. You're sending the scientists up, they're bringing the marines down, the ships can ground strike under certain conditions, and if you have the resources to do it, they can ground strike. So if the aliens are really overwhelming you in a certain place and you have a ship in the right place in space, then you can be raining fire down on them from space as well. It's really, really good how that works together. And the cooperative game in particular, so a few things are different about the scoring and everything. In the normal game, the aliens have points as well, and you're trying to race to 42, or whoever has the most points at the end of 10 rounds. So in the cooperative game, only the humans have points, and there is more of an emphasis on winning and losing those points. In particular, when you lose certain units, you'll lose these points, and the aliens are trying to win a war of attrition by dragging you down to 0 points. They're trying to destroy your pylons, which would destroy the city ultimately, because they're protecting the city. They are trying to kill enough scientists that you can't get 7 out there, or just wait you out. If you haven't sent the right number of scientists out to safety by the end of the 10th round, then you lose the game in that way as well. And this kind of speaks to the experience that David has with solo versions in games. He's done a lot of different bots. I think I've done a video for the solo mode of Snowdonia, the master set. He did a new bot for that, so that's one that I can think of that I've filmed if you want to go and see an example of one. But yeah, so there's 2 different bots at work here, where the principle, the ground units, are more or less about, move to this place and attack this many times. If you can't do that, move to some different place and try to attack. Try not to take too much damage and try to just attack. Just overwhelm, respawn. Every time a human player dies on the ground board, they get turned into a fallen token, and the principal can basically turn those fallen soldiers into more of the Legion, their grunt units, the small ones there that still contribute to their strength just as much as the bigger units do. They're just a lot easier to take out. So yeah, they're activating 2 of their 3 cards every time. So like in a lot of these great solo bots, you have some information over what you're doing. So like in the Ultima Factory ones, where you have half of the cards, so kind of what's going to happen, but you can't really plan that much for it. You can see that one of the cards would be terrible, and maybe you're going to have to make some adjustments in case that one happens. But yeah, you've got some vague information of what's going to happen, and only when it actually comes to the AI player's turn are you going to see how it actually pans out. But it's good having that information as well. And they work very well at just kind of running rampage around the board, and you just trying to find your opportunities, trying to see where you need to consolidate people, how you can get scientists out, how you can maybe take out the Empress, because that is a big threat. The Empress just moving around. If the Empress makes it into the city, the game is over. So you need to kind of see where her little faction is out on the board and try and slow them down or stop them or take her out. That's obviously going to be difficult because you can only assign every other damage in there. But then the meld bot as well, you have these dice that it isn't random in the sense that you are going to have a different number of activations of things. They've got these diamonds and circles on them, and each of the meld cards has got basically a top that concerns the diamonds and the bottom that concerns the circles. So the diamonds are usually, things that the ships are doing out here. And so more diamonds means that more ships are going to get to activate, more spores are going to be put out, and the bottom usually relates to either dropping more units down here, or doing a bombardment on to take out the humans, or constructing more things out in space for later. So you can kind of get a sense, even though you don't get any foreknowledge of those meld cards, you get some knowledge of, okay, well, they've rolled 4 diamonds, so they're going to be putting a load of spores out here, or there's a ton of circles. We could be potentially losing a load of points or getting some heavy fire down here. So do we want to move the people over to the pylons where they can't attack, and if they're still if they haven't been destroyed yet? So yeah, they work similarly, of course, in that you're drawing a card and doing what it says on the card, but in the different ways that they give you the knowledge and the different ways that they act as well. That they see threat. The meld kind of see threat and see the most dangerous spaces and do send people over there. But their priorities on what is dangerous, they aren't particularly concerned with scientist transports and things specifically. They will be, if there are scientists there and there are spores and no armada ships to protect them, then they will absolutely be taken out, just as the scientists would be. They try and kill the scientists out on the ground as well. But they have a kind of broader thing of danger of how many human ships are in a certain space, how many spores are in there, and then if it comes down to it, they'll work clockwise. But yeah, they have these kind of priorities, and you can kind of manipulate it a bit. It's like having that knowledge. Enough of how they work, how you can manipulate them a little bit, but you don't know exactly what the card is going to be to know the ins and outs of how they're going to react. They might not be particularly concerned with spaces in orbit this round. They might try and just zoom out to where you are just perched just out of orbit, thinking that you're safe, and then all of the meld manage to come out there and drop a load of spores, and they can take out up to 4 ships in one turn. So sometimes their machinations can be really, really devastating how they come out here. But I feel like I've been going on for too long here. But yeah, for all of this that's happening, as I mentioned, you only need to know your particular faction. And in a 2-player multiplayer, you've got 1 each. And the kind of upkeep for the bot, I will say as well, it's still a prototype. There's still things that I printed out off a PDF. But even in the kind of prototype stage, it's like most of these involved AI solo games. Say Gaia Project as well is a great solo one to watch for you solos out there. But at the start, you kind of think, what is all of this flowchart, and I need to see all of these things. At first, it is like that, but once you have gotten through a few rounds, and it kind of shows in the length of the rounds in the video as well, that you need to go through these flowcharts and explain all of these things, and it takes a long time in those first rounds. But once you are kind of used to it, and you can kind of as you get used to it, what you can just eliminate straight away. Well, they're not going to be interested in that. They're not going to be doing that. So these are the spaces I only really need to look at. You don't need to do all of these kind of flowcharts one after the other. And the more experience you would get with the game in general, it would work the same for your player abilities. You would know the kind of thing that is in there. You have a handle on what's in your combat deck in the Armada, for example. And yeah, it's one of those things that's just going to flow more and more smoothly with experience in the game. For solo, you would do the exact same thing as in the video, but you just control all of it yourself. So that kind of contributes to it's more complex in the sense that you've got to have both of those things swimming around in your head, and obviously with experience that will get easier. But the main thing is that it's just the downtime. In a multiplayer game, you're still concerned on the other player's turn and need to know what they're doing and what their plans for, and can I spend the echo drones, or do you need them for something you're doing on your turn? Still going to be communication and cooperation, but there is a bit of breather time when it's the Armada's turn. You can kind of see what they're doing, see how that affects you, how they can help you and stuff, but you get a bit of a breather from thinking too much about it and can be concentrating on your turn. And when it comes round to you as the expedition, similarly, the Armada can do all of this, and you still need to check if, can I send a scientist up and whatever. but you do get that breather in a 2-player game and someone to bounce ideas off that, of course, you don't in a solo game. But I'm kind of thinking of I'm out of practice with solo generally, and I also don't in cooperative games play multiple characters very much. So I imagine that there are a lot of soloers out there saying it will be easy. I could handle both of these at the same time, but hopefully you'll know from the video anyway. You'll see what's going on in the playthrough. You'll see how much there is to be thinking about as a player, and know that for solo. But 2-player, absolutely think that it can seem, especially when you've got kind of all the rule books and the player aids and things laid out, it can seem like there is such a load to be thinking about and such a lot to do. But you get a grip pretty easily, I think, pretty quickly, that, okay, well, I don't have to be concerned about all of these things all of the time. There is actually a core that I need to be worrying about the most that is easy to get to grips with, and the special cases and say the some of the flowcharts for the bots and things, that when they come into play, you will get more and more used to them, and it will be easy to do. But yeah, this is turning into a loop of me saying the same thing towards the end, isn't it? Anyway, who cares what I think? The playthrough, it was really, really long. Well, it took me most of a day to film. So hopefully that gives you some good idea of what the game is like to play, more than anything that I think of it. And I will leave you to watch that if you haven't yet already. Thank you for watching, though, and see you for the next game. Bye, everyone.